Hello everyone.
This is a YouTuber who goes by the name of Actually, I will not be naming her for the entirety of this video. Like myself, she has a smaller channel and chances are you may not have heard of her. If you have heard of her, it was most likely in connection to one of the many obstacles she has overcome in her own life. A deep dive of her YouTube channel will reveal that she has been homeless many times while dealing with the myriad of mental as well as health issues. She lives with dissociative identity disorder, and another condition causing her to use a feeding tube because solid foods could literally kill her.
Basically, if I would have kept on just eating, I could have died of a heart attack.
As if this weren't enough, she has had a variety of personal tragedies that any one of could make the average person snap. She was kidnapped and raised by a cult as a child, a victim of domestic violence, doxxed, shamed, and harassed repeatedly online, accused of animal abuse in connection to her service dog, and shockingly, almost a victim of human trafficking back in 2016 when she fell under the spell of an unnamed man and woman in Seattle, Washington.
They said that it did sound like human trafficking.
These stories have been told and retold, often with a link added to a GoFundMe, Etsy, and/or Patreon, and a request for donations to aid with a legal case, housing, various necessities, and living expenses. It's all too much for one person to have to deal with. So imagine my shock when I learned that in March 2020, she was almost a victim of human trafficking for a second time.
I'm escaping human trafficking, and today I'm meeting with the person to get my belongings back.
Well, actually I can tell you exactly how shocked I was, because this time I actually knew the person she was accusing.
Okay, and do you know what his name is? Yes, Wes.
On March 12th, 2020, I was almost arrested in front of a Walmart in Chehalis, Washington because she was accusing me,
WesMoast,
of trafficking her. Buckle up because this one is wild. I didn't just bring the salt because you know
your boy
has a big stack of receipts.
I've heard so many of your guys' stories, and it's inspired me to live more honestly.
Are you involved with the human trafficking, or you're a victim? I'm a victim. I'm a victim. I'm a victim.
WesMoast and it's here for us, salty and dangerous, come on!
I let my accuser move into my home for a few reasons. She was in desperate need of help living in what she called a bad situation in Georgia, but more importantly, she needed emergency surgery to replace her feeding tube as it was dangerously overdue. I have heard claims that the move was because of a supposed doxing by YouTuber Realstream News, but I can confirm that this move had been planned and paid for prior to the supposed incident. Her insurance is in the Pacific Northwest, and I happen to live in the Pacific Northwest, so I offered to help.
He traveled me across the entire country, and then
I offered to pay for a plane ticket and help her find housing, but she was insistent that she had neither the time or funds to find a place to live before the feeding tube would be at a critical point. With 2 extra bedrooms in my house, I eventually agreed to let her use one of them temporarily while she got on her feet. Almost from the time she arrived, I identified personality traits that made me question everything she had told me before. I did not trust her and felt like I was being manipulated.
And it was really fucking manipulative.
It was probably the food that was the first sign to me that all was not as it should be. I had read about gastroparesis and the foods people affected with the condition are able to eat, and I made sure to stock up on them at home. None of these, however, matched her daily diet of candy, cookies, chips, chicken nuggets, chicken fries, pizza, spicy tacos, hamburgers, junk food. I saw in a video my accuser released just a day or two ago that I allegedly forced her to eat these foods.
With gastroparesis, they can't sit around and eat egg sandwiches. They can't sit around and eat tacos and salsa and just food. They can't eat chips and cookies all day.
But as these texts show, these are things she chose to eat, and in many cases, outright asked for, Why would I force anyone to eat anything? I was led to believe she was going to be on a feeding tube 24 hours per day, not raiding my kitchen like it was a set of a 90s commercial for Totino's pizza rolls.
That's why I always have Totino's pizza rolls.
I am not a doctor, and I'm not pretending I know everything about gastroparesis. It just seemed odd to me that this person who on her own GoFundMe mentioned how difficult it is for her to eat solid food, ate so much of it at my house that I had to ask her to slow down in a set of written rules just weeks after she got here.
I like pizza. I like bagels. I like hot dogs with mustard and beans.
To be 100% honest, the first 2 weeks living with my accuser were pretty miserable. It's typical to expect little issues here and there while sharing space with someone, but the pattern of things I dealt with were starting to give me anxiety. I am not the most difficult person in the world to live with, but I do expect mindfulness, respect, and common courtesy. A week or so after moving in, my future accuser went out with a friend who lived locally. She messaged me on her way back to let me know her friend would also be joining her at my home. This upset me. I wasn't being asked if this stranger could come to my house. I was being told that this person was coming to my house. I would never do that, and I don't know many people who would as a guest. It was this one message alone that when the police saw it, they knew that my accuser was not being trafficked.
And so he's been holding you against your will? No.
Not only was she leaving on her own with complete freedom, but she wanted to bring people back to hang out at my house. If I was a trafficker, I was really bad at it and completely unclear on the concept.
I am here to kidnap you.
This was just one of many examples that I really don't want to get into in this video, but you can see here from the rules, I was fed up. There was no way I would be able to do this for 3 months. That same night, I started writing out a set of rules and expectations via Google Docs. Why Google Docs? I wanted to make sure the original edit date would be clear because in this document, I would include a new earlier move-out date of April 30th. This was 1 month sooner than previously discussed, but still much longer than the 20 days the state requires for a legal eviction. Had she stayed through April, she would have had 10 weeks of free room and board. Well, almost free. Because of the ridiculous amount of food she was going through, I let her know I would be charging her $75 monthly for expenses. Still a killer bargain, but worth pointing out.
Every time I come in the kitchen, you're in the kitchen eating up all the food.
On top of the earlier move-out date, I was initially offering $500 cash if my guest managed to move out by the end of March, and $250 cash if she stayed until the end of April.
I'm a victim.
I also wanted to spell out the situation very clear on top of these rules so that the story cannot be changed later. Like here when I wrote, "This is the reason I was pretty adamant about finding you a place to live before you moved here, but I know that was not possible, so we are where we are." The house rules were completed on March 2nd and given to my accuser on March 3rd. I will include a link to a copy with a few identifying names redacted, but otherwise they are identical to the original rules given to her. I did send the original unedited version of the text as well as the house rules to Drama and Opinions for verification though. I felt like a petty asshole writing this stuff out, but I also felt like, what kind of asshole needs to be told not to leave stacks of dishes in a bedroom for days, or leave her dog's urine-soaked towels sitting on the floor? Less than 12 hours after delivering these rules, an ex of mine who had been stalking me for several months was arrested and charged with cyber-stalking and harassment. It was a tense time at my home as the messages I had been receiving from my ex were getting more and more erratic and desperate. While in the middle of dealing with this back and forth and the phone calls with the police, my accuser wanted to talk about the rules that I had given her, setting the move-out date because in her words, she was in a panic. She didn't like that she was being asked to leave a month earlier than expected. I understood, but at the same time, I let her know my mental health and sanity were worth more to me than anything else. I felt like the 2.5 months of room and board and financial assistance being offered were more than fair, and I was not willing to budge on that move-out date. She seemed to accept this as the new reality. Later in the day, she thanked me for the $500 and said she would be out promptly. I reminded her I was in no way kicking her out and that she had until the end of April as I had written in the rules, but she seemed intent on getting the $500 incentive for being out by the end of March. Things changed the next day, and she tried having a confrontation with me on the night of March 4th, when she loudly told me I needed to be held accountable for my actions, and asking her to leave earlier than expected, and I quickly shut her down. You aren't going to scream at me in my house. I did feel bad though. I sent her this text message letting her know she could stay through April, and I would give her the $500 as I originally offered for March, and I would help her find her a suitable place to live. This was my effort to be more accountable and appease her concerns while sticking with the given move-out date. My message was ignored.
It was really fucking manipulative.
Supposed to go to Seattle to cover a court case on March 5th, but with the virus running rampant in the area, I was asked not to go. I let my accuser know I would not be going to Seattle because I no longer had a reason to make the 7-hour round trip, and offered to pay for her train ticket and drive her to the Amtrak station. She got her own ticket, sent a few passive-aggressive messages about how she shouldn't be on the train, and that was that. The next day I drove her to the train station and dropped her off. This was Thursday, March 5th, and she was originally planning to come back by March 6th or March 7th. I was happy to get 1 or 2 days of normalcy back in my home, and she seemed excited for her trip, even live streaming from the train about traveling for emergency surgery.
We still really need help on the GoFundMe because we are still planning on leaving at the end of this month and don't really have a plan of where we're going.
This is where things get crazy. There was still cordial conversation going back and forth between the two of us after her planned departure. She let me know when she arrived in Seattle and kept me updated on her surgery. She claimed she would not be returning on the night of March 6th because of the anesthesia she was under, and that made perfect sense to me. The next morning on Saturday, March 7th, I got a message from my now former house guest telling me she was making the decision to stay in Seattle. She told me she would come back for her things and then let me know there were complications with her surgery and that her and her dog would be sleeping in a tent. A claim which would later turn out to be untrue, but did not make a lot of sense to me considering she was leaving a safe house for the streets of Seattle voluntarily. I wanted her to be able to get her things and offered to drive them up to her, a 7-hour round trip later in the week. She countered by offering to meet me halfway just a few days later. Someone forwarded this video to me on Twitter on March 10th, where my accuser was now discussing being homeless with a broken feeding tube, asking for money via GoFundMe and Patreon. This felt manipulative to me.
Fucking manipulative.
Considering she was choosing the living situation she was claiming to be in, but that is not my place to interfere. The linked GoFundMe offered information about complications from the surgery.
They did a CT scan and blood work and assured me that this one had not yet flowed into my stomach, but were unsure if I should use it or just try to eat solid foods, which went so well before the feeding tube placement.
What did she mean from that last line? Eating solid foods was no problem for her prior to the surgery as long as she was here. She ate all the time and she chose the food she ate.
I'll eat eggplant. I could even eat a baby deer. La 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 la.
Feeding tubes were normally only reserved for going places in public.
I don't have feeding tube formula. I'm gonna try and call up my insurance.
Okay, so yes, she was out of formula, but we already had a plan to meet 2 days after this video was posted, so I could bring her several cases of it sitting in my garage. Again, it felt manipulative.
I'm a victim.
And really fucking manipulative.
But I said nothing because I didn't want to feed into things. I thought this line was a little
Where I
weird.
was, and have pretty much no ability to go get my things because of jurisdiction, and also not a lot of people that I know drive.
But in my experience, she liked to fabricate things and make them seem more drastic and dramatic than they were, so I let this go with something else being said in an effort to crank up the emotion and drive in those donations. Seems to have worked too, because those donations are at almost $250 as of March 25th. I was not going to pay a dime of that move-out money I was gifting until the drop-off had been completed, and I made plans to meet about 100 miles from my home at a Walmart in Chehalis, Washington. I specifically chose this public location because I wanted to make sure there were plenty of witnesses should she try and make some wild claim later. Like I said, I didn't trust her. She messaged me on the morning of the 12th and offered this little gem.
I hope that me leaving early has been good for your mental health.
I didn't want small talk. I wanted to know what all she needed from my house so I could distinguish it from the literal boxes of trash and food wrappers she left in the bedroom. She ran down the list and said,
"Feel free to use trash bags. That won't bug me in the slightest."
Followed by,
"If you need my Cash App again too, let me know."
I realized pretty quickly that her feigning concern for my mental state was just a request for the move-out money I had offered, so I ignored the other messages.
I do hope things get easier. I'm happy that I have a chance to retrieve belongings and a ride so that you don't have to drive all the way. Or the option people said was to ask for law enforcement to do it, but jurisdictions are an issue. So I couldn't figure it out for a second there.
I again chose to ignore that last line because it seemed like an invitation to fight or converse further, and I wasn't interested in either of those. I don't know why anyone would have advised her to ask for law enforcement unless she had lied to them, and I really didn't care.
Maybe a snack. He's got snacks.
You in the black hat, gray shirt.
Eating the banana.
You can eat that banana outside.
I wanted her stuff gone and to move on with my life. I obviously wasn't concerned about the police because I made the drive as planned. We were planning to meet at 4, but because of a conference call, I was running a little late.
She's late, as per usual.
Not sure what that meant, considering I was an hour early to pick her up at the airport, and she sat around my house for 2 weeks, so I was never late to anything with her, but whatever.
Stop fucking lying!
While on the way, I got another request for the move-out money.
Please, don't forget the Cash App.
I got to Walmart a little after 5 p.m. and pulled up next to the car she was in. I chose not to put her things in trash bags like she asked, because I assumed she would take pictures of them, put them on GoFundMe or YouTube, and claim that I treated her items like actual trash. I know how this game works. I instead put everything in 2 suitcases I let her have, and brought along the 4 cases of formula. I started taking things out of the back of my car when a police SUV pulled up. When she told me they were there to supervise the handoff at her request, I was confused. Why? There were no threats, no violence, no yelling, no effort on my part to keep her things, or any reason in the world to take this officer from what he could be doing to watch me hand off a few boxes and suitcases. She said she wasn't sure what was going on, and the policeman asked if he could have a few words with me. I thought he wanted to get me away from the car my accuser was in so that they can load up and leave, but then he started to ask me questions and told me why he was there. I had been accused of sex trafficking by my former house guest, and he needed to hear my story before we headed down to the station.
Can this be happening? Will WesMoast get hemmed up in some bullshit? Or will the Chehalis police see the fabric of truth? Will it be 90 minutes back home by car? Or 90 years behind bars? See the texts, read the threats, and hear the actual 911 call that started it all.
I have a need for, like, a police.
All that plus this guy.
An education, an alliteration, some information for your contemplation.
And more. In the most thrilling conclusion.
Want more Moast? Subscribe or click the video above.
You drink up all the milk, don't care what kind of milk it is. You don't care. 2%, 3% buttermilk, patent milk. Serenity now! Serenity now!
Catchy Studio.